Welcome to the Recovery Lab podcast. We're glad you were able to join us. Recovery Lab hopes to destigmatize addiction and normalize recovery.
Our platform provides an avenue to share the many stories of those that have recovered from addiction, providing for the listener the most basic antidote to addiction. Hope.
That's our new intro music.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Recovery Lab's funky ass beat. Anyway, I'm Drew Hassan.
I'm Daniel Anderson.
We are the Recovery Lab. This is episode number 66.
66. How about
Steve
that,
Robertson. Man, thank you.
Happy to be here.
Well, glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man. And also a word to our listener. Let me switch camera angles here. So I am trying to be a part of the episode as well as produce the episode with multiple cameras all simultaneously. So my camera angle switching may be slightly delayed, but I'm doing the best that I can, and we'll make this as awesome as possible. So, Steve, first of all, thank you so much for coming today. I know you drove here from Starkville today, so that is absolutely insane, and we're grateful. You know, I had the opportunity of meeting you not too long ago. Actually, what was that? Last weekend, week before that, at Ashley Deadeye Jones' house. With your absolutely insanely lovely wife, Dana.
Thank you. Thank you. Who do I invoice for this, by the way?
So,
Right.
Yeah. So no, but you guys were absolutely lovely. And, you know, that was playing, although I didn't play, but watching you guys play Rook in Ashley's den, it took me back to like high school days of playing around, you know, sitting around a table with a bunch of friends, and it was really a magical moment for me. So I was really, really blessed to be able to experience that with you guys. So, all right, Drew. Well, let's do this. I know you've got a new book out, right?
Yep, got a brand new one out. I already working on the next one.
Okay, great. And if you would, make sure you stay right in front of that mic right there.
All right.
So tell us a little bit about the book, and then we'll also, you know, dive into a little bit about what makes Steve Steve.
Well, that could take all day, but yeah, the new book, When the Bottom Falls, is out. It's been out for a couple months, doing extremely well, and you never know what to expect with that kind of thing, because I'm stepping out of the sports genre a little bit. You know, sports books have done exceptionally well, and this is more of a memoir. It's about, you know, kind of what led to me turning to drugs and alcohol and becoming a drug addict, and how I was able to get sober and how I've been able to stay sober now, coming up on 32 years in a month, you know. So I think I would struggle to say that I'm an expert on the topic, but I would say that I've worked a pretty good program of recovery, and I just did not want to live a life where I did not impart the things that I have learned along the way about how to stay clean and sober. And there's so many books written about addiction from a clinical point of view. Like, there are a lot of, you know, addictionologists and people like that have written books. This is real world knowledge. I mean, this is one of those things from somebody who's actually done it. You don't learn this in a classroom. You learn it by living life on life's terms. And so I just felt like I needed to write that book before I died. And I used to have this crippling fear that I would lay on my deathbed having never written a book. And now I'm working on research for number 7. Matter of fact, I was looking through some newspaper articles from 1912 earlier this morning for the next book. I'm writing a biography about Dudy Noble, the most notable sports figure in Mississippi State history, and so I'm excited about that. But
yeah, you were doing some research on that the other weekend, weren't you?
That's
you and
every
Dana
day.
were down there. Okay,
it's every day, and I joke with this. Like a friend of mine told me, he said, "I think you are now the world's most renowned expert on Dudy Noble. I think Dana, my wife, is number 2, and she's sick and tired of hearing about it." But because that's what happens. I mean, when you get immersed in a project, I mean, it's like you learn a little nugget here. Like, you know, State and Ole Miss didn't play in 1912, 13, or 14, and I don't know that many people understand why that is, and so today I was able to.
Well, you want to share with us? Because I'm kind of curious now.
Well, Ole Miss was kicked out of the Southern Intercollegiate Athletics Association for playing ineligible players, so they were, you know, precluded from playing league schools for basically 2.5 years, and so we didn't have an Egg Bowl in 1912, 13, or 14, and I'll write more about that in the book. But that's the fun thing about being a researcher and writing books that are of historical value, is that there's so many stories out there that people don't know, or they know just a little bit about. They don't understand. I'm sure every State and Ole Miss fan has looked at the series rivalry and said, well, why didn't they play those 3 years? Well, now we know, and got quotes and telegrams and all kind of cool stuff like that that's never been made available to this generation. And so that's the fun part about all this, is finding things that people find of interest.
Well, it's certainly interesting to us, and you're a podcast guest created by God himself, because you have lots of things that you've thought through and you have opinions. And I think that is one of the most interesting things. I was really taken by your appearance on Ashley's show that I watched. One of the things I did in preparation of today. What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you that made you want to write the book, When the Bottom Falls, as opposed to just stick it? I mean, what was the deciding factor there?
Well, my wife was travel nursing in New Mexico, which nearly killed me. And I say that all the time, and I don't think she likes it, but that's okay. She can learn to live with it, but I'm not built for that. And I think in the beginning I was so busy writing books and, booking rock shows and doing that kind of stuff. And one day I just woke up and I was like, where is my wife? How did I ever agree to this? She's 17 and a half hours away from home. It was my kid's senior year. And so I made a lot of trips out there to go see her. And it was on one of those trips back. I mean, my heart was just so tender. And I thought, this is the time to write this book. I mean, I was initially writing this book when I got the book contract for Flim Flam. I had no idea what I was doing. Just going to sit down and write a book and then, pitch it and see if I couldn't get it picked up. And I just felt like maybe the timing wasn't right. It's like I had a friend of mine, and she said this, God has given you this platform and established this platform as a writer for you to tell this story. And that was actually years ago. And I always remembered that. It's like the reason that didn't happen when I thought it was supposed to happen is because it wasn't supposed to happen then. And so, thankfully I've had, 6 books. I'll pick up a Clarion Ledger before I leave town today, and a good chance it'll be on the bestseller list again. And that's a special thing. It really is. And it never gets to be old hat for me. I was at a book signing, and I won't mention names because I don't want to embarrass people, but I had a guy that's a very renowned writer that I respect so much. He said, Steve, you're always on the list. And I'm like, what list? And he said, well, you're always on the Mississippi bestsellers list. And one of our peers said, I was on there for 1 week, and it was the greatest week. I have it framed in my office. And I thought to myself, I won't say that it's come easy for me, but every time I've written a book, the book by In Public of Mississippi has been very receptive to that. And I never, ever take that for granted. And it's so incredibly special to me.
Well, Mississippi has a rich literary
Absolutely.
Tradition. One of
Absolutely.
my favorite jobs of all time, shout out to John Evans of Lemuria. I loved working there, and it's great people. And really, there is a rich tradition. There are fantastic writers from Mississippi who love to tell interesting stories, and I'm honored that we have a new member of that community here.
I love it. I
keeping
think
the tradition alive.
Yeah, 100%. The Mississippi is so rich and has a lot of culture and a lot of incredibly, insanely talented writers that have come out of the state. And I think a lot of times people don't really realize that. But one of the things that I just keeps running through my mind, and I just finished When the Bottom Falls last night, and I just, there are a few moments when you guys were talking about, the children that were lost and how you felt about that, how Dana felt about that, how incredibly difficult it was. And you were bearing your soul in this book. And honestly, I'm not a book reader. I'm a bit embarrassed to say that, but I'm not. But you inspired me when you agreed to come on this show. You inspired, you know what? I'm going to do some research. I'm going to research this. I want this to be a success. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this book. And without you, I would have never picked up that book. I would have never probably gotten back in to reading. And now I probably will be doing that every night. It's calming, it's peaceful, and it's lovely. So thank you for that, for bringing me back into that world. But the mere fact that you were, a convict. You were in the darkness. You were in the darkest of darkest places, and you realized that this was not working anymore, and you decided to do something different. And now, 32 years later, give or take, you are following your dreams, you're following your passions, you're doing what you love. And I just want our listeners and viewers, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, look at this man sitting on this chair right here. He was exactly where you were. Drew and I were exactly where you are when you were struggling, when we were struggling with drugs and alcohol. There is a way out. There is a path out. You just have to have a little bit of willingness to do something different.
Sure. And that's the first thing I'll say is about the Lemuria thing. So when I was in middle school, and John didn't like it when I tell this story, he said it makes him feel old, but they were across the highway, right? They were across the interstate. And there was nowhere to buy books in my hometown of Columbia, Mississippi. I mean, you didn't have Amazon back then, we didn't even have the internet back then, and we're all from the 1900s, and so when things were a little more pedestrian. But we took a field trip. We'd ordered our books. Parents had to give us a check. We give the teacher and ordered these books. We were doing some segment on, and we went to Jackson on a field trip, and we got our books as part of the field trip. And we went to Lemuria Books. And I remember walking around that bookstore. I was like, this is a real bookstore. And I said, one of these days, I'm going to have a book on these shelves. And thankfully, I have 6. And that green couch is iconic in Mississippi. That's the same place that John Grisham sat, the same place Eudora Welty sat. And so when I go have a chance to sit there and sign books and meet with people, it is in really respects, it's not just about hope, but about redemption, right? And kind of along the lines of what Daniel was saying is that I was so far away from where I needed to be that any step I took was in the right direction.
I love that.
And I think it's important to understand, hope is the greatest of all things. And I write that in the book because there's so many people out there that feel hopeless. And there were people that gave up on me. There was just, I was left for dead by so many people. And I'm 6'2", 215 some odd pounds today. So when I checked into rehab, I was 6'2", 146 pounds. And I had to live with an IV drip in my arm for a couple of days. And, it was a real dramatic moment in my life when I just wanted to go to bed, right? I mean, I'd been arrested. I was in Lamar County jail for 6 days, no drugs or alcohol, having a detox the old-fashioned way, and thought about tying a sheet over my neck and jumping off the rail. And, I'd some other suicide attempts before then. And
yeah, you were asking God to take you.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. And when I lay there in that bed at Pine Grove, I prayed to die.
And what happened with that man that came in that room and started doing it?
It's a guy named Dr. Harmon Foster, and he's a guy that lost his license to practice meds. And so I'm laying there just wanting to die. And I wake up, and there's this stranger kneeling at my bedside praying for God to save my life. And at that point, I didn't want to live, and as I wrote in the book, I mean, thankfully he had a better relationship with God at the time than I did, right?
A little more insight.
Yeah. And I just felt like, how could this complete stranger feel this so passionately about a life that I wanted to lose? And a lot of it was just because the path to redemption was so incredibly narrow. Right. It's like, and it was just too much to overcome. And that's what happens is you convince yourself there's no coming back from this.
Yeah, well, in all real ways of measure, by all real metrics, it's undiscernible. Mm-hmm. Your life has spiraled into nothingness, and there is no real way of knowing how do I ever get back to something that seems normal, something that seems
right. And
redeeming.
the worst part is, like, the vast majority of the time that spiral was due to us and our poor life choices. Like, we may point fingers all the time, but deep down we know, like, we did this to ourselves. You know what I mean? Nobody forced us to put drugs or alcohol into our system. Like, this was a choice that we made, and now we're having to pay the consequences for it, and it sucks.
Well, that's the honest moment, right? It's when there's nobody else to blame. Like when you reach the end of your own bad decisions, and there's nobody else to blame. I think that's really step one. I mean, right? When we start talking about the 12 steps of recovery and that sort of stuff, it's when you reach the point where you realize I
did this.
Victim of my own decisions. I may have had some co-conspirators in my demise.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I am responsible for me. And so that is a humbling but also empowering moment in the life of the still suffering addict.
You're speaking my love language. I feel the exact same way, for real. Yeah.
But that's what happens. It's like, so we were at a point powerless, but when we're given the ability to choose again, that can never be taken away from us.
Well, that coin of powerlessness that is described at length and discussed ad nauseum in AA meetings has a flip side to it. Well, if I'm powerless over this, then that means I'm not powerless over some other things. I can do some things that will probably yield favorable results, as opposed to doubling down on my misery by continuing to drink and use and,
Right, which we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is it becomes such a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of my dear friends, and I lost him, I write about him in the book, is Scott Sorensen. And I remember one day we're just sitting around just shooting the breeze at my apartment, and he goes, there's two kinds of people in recovery. There are those that think they're going to make it and those that think they won't. And the funny thing is they're both right.
Right.
Nobody gets sober by accident, right? And I didn't get lucky. I mean, it's like I've earned every single day. The only thing that I was given was a second chance. And then, of course, the knowledge that was imparted to me by the old timers and people that have gone before me. But I didn't get lucky. And I may have had some times in my life that I may have been, quote, unlucky. But at the end of the day, I knew the right thing to do at every crossroads in my life. I just didn't do it. And so once you understand that aspect of it, is that, I got myself into this mess. With the help of some other people, I can also get myself out of this mess. And once you're free from it, once you get out of the jungle and step 2 comes and you're restored to sanity and things of that nature, then all of a sudden you have a semblance of control. Now, you still live in life on life's terms. And that was a very naive belief that I had for a long time, is that I thought if I just did all the right things, I went to work every day, didn't get in trouble, didn't get, have trouble with cops, or I didn't drink or to do drugs, that life wouldn't happen to me. And that's just not true. I mean, you live in that pink cloud for as long as you can, but the reality of it is there will come a day in your life when something beyond your control happens that is going to knock you on your butt. What are you going to do then? Anybody can stay clean and sober when you're getting what you want out of life. There's no skill to that. You don't need a sponsor. You don't need steps. You don't need a program. You can just say, hey, well, everything is lovely, so I'll just keep riding the wave. What do you do when life kicks you in the nuts and laughs in your face?
Yeah.
What do you do then? That's when the program comes in. That's when you have to make sure that you've got a good foundation, because that day is coming. And Mama will tell you, baby, some days there's going to be days like this, but she'll never know how many of them there are going to be. And there's going to be a lot of them. What do you do then? And that's why you have to have a support system. You have to have people that you can confide in. I got stories from other people and secrets that I will take to my grave, because that's what it required to help that person stay clean and sober. We're a community, and nobody gets sober by themselves.
Right.
And there's so many things that have happened to me in my life. If I didn't have somebody I could call, and it's just like, when Dana was out in New Mexico, I woke up that day and I was so incredibly depressed. I was like, look at my life. I mean, I've got this business and everything's going great, but I'm miserable. I'm absolutely miserable. First thing that I did.
And this was in sobriety.
Oh, this is last November. This is a year ago November. This is coming up on 31 years clean and sober.
Right.
Right. I text my 3 best friends in recovery. I am not in a good place. Check on me. If you don't hear from me in an hour, call me. You don't ever get to a point, you don't ever graduate. You're always part of continuing education when it comes to recovery.
Right.
And the day that we forget that, today we go get loaded. And so I knew what to do, because, I love it when life is a lot less fragile, right? When, I kind of got it all, by the short and curlies, but life will get you and you will be tested. And how you manage that test ultimately boils down to how committed you are to your recovery.
Right, and how efficient you are at using the tools of the program also. We have a tremendous tremendous toolkit that it's just laid out on the table. Look, if you have this issue, this is what you do. It's all laid out in black and white, and it's so beautiful. Our choice, and we have a choice, our choice is, are we going to use those tools or are we going to not? Are we going to go into that self-depressive state of self-hatred and self-loathing and pity party all day long? Or are we going to take some action and get the out of this?
Well, there's a lot of people that die from terminal uniqueness.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we begin to think, oh, nobody's ever been through this before. There is nothing that we're going to encounter that people before us have not encountered and managed to stay clean and sober.
Bingo.
Right? I mean, we start thinking, oh, well, nobody's ever felt this way. Oh, get over yourself. Right? And I've been there myself. I've been there and thought, oh, well, nobody understands. And that's the lie we tell ourselves in the beginning, right? Is nobody will ever understand. The truth of the matter is that there are so many people out there that have gone through so much worse. You know, and it's like the title of When the Bottom Falls, right? It all goes back to a song out of a band from Memphis called Sleep Theory, who I absolutely love. It was their first single. They were an unsigned band, and the song just resonated with me. And I was driving back from New Mexico. It had a great couple of days, but I was sad because I had to leave Dana out there. And I was listening to this song on repeat. I mean, it ministered to me. And part of the chorus is when the bottom falls and goes up in flames, you know. And I thought about how I can equate that to recovery because there, and I write about this in When the Bottom Falls, is, you know, there's some points in there and you think, okay, well, this is the moment, right? Okay, he's been through all, now he'll get clean and so wrong. And there's a truism in our recovery vernacular that is completely false. And I'm going to talk about this today. I think it's important to understand. People say, oh, you know, well, he hit rock bottom. There is no such thing as rock bottom. There's death because things can always get worse. And that was the case for me.
Always.
Ain't that the truth?
That was the case for me. Like, you know, and I lose my job. I'm ostracized from my entire family. I just kept digging, man. I mean, it's like, hey, let's see if we can get to China here.
Don't underestimate Satan's creativity. He'll find new ways to make your life awful.
Yeah,
oh, absolutely. And the rest of that story too is like people say, well, you know, they really reached the bottom, and I'm thinking, and I just kind of keep my mouth shut, but I snicker about it a little bit. And I think, you think this is bad? Just wait, keep using. Just wait. They talk about it being a progressive illness. Oh my gosh. There was nothing beneath me when I got clean and sober. Nothing beneath me. And so when I had all these people trying to tell me, well, you're so young. I mean, you just got a drinking disorder. I mean, let's just put whatever fancy label on we want to make it easier. You know, because I think one of the things I love about shows like this is we can give real language to hard things, right? Nowadays, it's like we can't even call things for what they are anymore, right? I mean, it's like we have to try to excuse everybody's negative behavior. But let me tell you this will kill you. Mm-hmm. And this whole thing about, well, let's just romanticize it. Well, he's not really a drug addict. Yes, he is. Okay. And that's where we get dangerous, right? When we start trying to excuse the negative behavior and try to explain it away rather than call it for what it is.
Well, I think people want to, they have this approach of, well, we want to make the man or woman not feel so bad.
Right.
You know, it's a reaction to trauma. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, sad, remorseful, whatever led you to use in excess is pitiable, but it doesn't absolve you of the responsibility. You know, you did those things.
Absolutely. Well, another thing about that too is my attitude about that is, you know, and again, I'm 32 years sober, and you know, I'm sure there's so many things out there that I could have done a little bit better. But you know, if I step on somebody's toes, I hope it hurts, because the truth and honesty is what gets you sober, right? We want to have all these issues about maybe it's an issue of morality or, like you talk about, it's a reaction to trauma. There is a crisis, real or imagined, in every addict's life that pushes you over the edge. Period. Right? Now we can assign blame if we want to, but it doesn't change the state that we're in.
No.
Right? So no matter how we got here, it's like people like, and I love these people, and I say love. I do mean this from a place of love, but I'm going to be brutally honest here. There are so many people that are involved with somebody that's a still suffering addict, and they goes, well, you know, I think the whole thing is a choice, and I don't believe that this thing is a disease. It doesn't matter what you believe. Your opinion means absolutely nothing, okay? Because we're not going to sit here and debate the fact that your loved one is dying.
Right.
That's where we are.
Clay Edwards asked me when I was on his radio show if I thought that addiction was a disease, and I told him, my honest, I don't care. it's immaterial to my day-to-day life whether or not I think I have a disease of addiction or a learned collective of poor decisions.
Right.
It's netting me the same result, misery.
Right. Exactly.
And along those lines too, it's like I'm not going to break anybody's anonymity here, but I deal with a lot of people in recovery and in addiction. And there's a young man that I've spoken with multiple times, and he was around the same age I was when I got clean and sober. And he's like, well, I drink just like my friends, except these things don't happen to them. Okay, well, as I explained to him, well, you're wired a little bit differently than them. I'm not going to sit here and give you the medical definition of all this stuff, but the reality of it is if it doesn't affect them the way that affects you, then you don't need to do it, right? You can't keep having this competition. It's like, well, it's just like, I mean, how many people do you know that sit down and have, they eat chocolate pie every night for dinner or whatever, and they never develop diabetes, but you got somebody else out there that tries to eat right, and they do. They got to manage it all the time. We're all wired a little bit differently, but
Right.
your point is a good one. The why doesn't matter. It's the what.
Exactly,
This is where we are. It doesn't matter how we got here. We're on death's door, right? And so rather than sit around and say, well, I think you should do this, you do whatever it takes. It's just like John Lennon says. I mean, it's like when somebody's drowning, they're not going to be polite and say, hey, will you please help me? They're just going to scream. And that when you're at that moment, when your loved one is screaming for help, the last thing they need is your hypothesis. They need your help. Grab a hand and start pulling.
I mean, you can't sum it up better than that. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. This is a deadly disease. This okay. And if you don't believe it's a disease, fine. This is something that will kill you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And everybody's wired a little bit differently. But for me, when I put a substance into my body, it sets off the phenomenon of craving, and I can't stop. Some people can recreationally take drugs or drink with no consequences whatsoever. Everybody is different. But the issue is, what are you going to do? You're going to take some action, or you're going to, again, get back into that, the woe is me. Oh, I'm just so awful. I'm a horrible person. How could anyone love me? Or are you going to you know what? I have hit my head against the wall time and time again. I keep on trying. I keep on getting up. I'm going to do it one more time. Maybe this time I'll get it. And you open up the door and you have a little bit of willingness to do something different. And that's what this is all about. For me, it was, I had to get to a point where I knew that drugs and alcohol were never going to be a solution to my life for me in my life. And I held on to the idea that maybe pot will be a solution for me. Maybe I can leave the meth, I can leave the alcohol, I can leave the cocaine, I can leave the alcohol, but I really, really want, I feel like I need pot in my life. Like it helps calm me down. And I held on to that for years and years and years. And I would get, 5 years under my belt, 8 years under my belt. And that little voice would come back in and creep in and say, hey, you're doing really good. Like you're working really hard. How about just, a little bit of pot just to calm you down? And it doesn't have to be pot. It can be, we hold on to, little things all the time. Like I said, it could be a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of wine just every once in a while. But it wasn't until I got to the point where I had tried it time and time again and failed. I had tried the marijuana maintenance plan. I had tried everything to make my way work. And I hit my head against the wall time and time again. And it wasn't until I had that moment where the realization was had that drugs and alcohol of any kind, any sort of substance, is never going to be a good fit for me in my life. And it was at that moment that my higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, recognized that willingness and said, okay, I'm going to take you by the hand and we're going to do this. And that was the difference between this time and every other time that I've tried to get sober. So I don't know. What you're doing right now is just, it's so incredibly beautiful to me. You are out there hitting the streets, driving from Starkville to here today to spread the word and to help people. And I feel like I know this whole other Steve, the Steve from the first of the book, the beginning of When the Bottom Falls, the criminal, kind of cutthroat. Like, man, you're gonna, show up at the, you're a man's man, and you don't take shit from people.
I still don't.
I know, but the mere fact that you've used your past to now become profitable to help other people, I guess that's what I'm really grasped onto, and that's why probably having you come on here was probably the most exciting guest that we've had thus far. Just because,
well, you're living your passions.
Yeah.
That's true. One thing, Daniel, that the best phrase to me in the literature of anything recovery related, it was written almost 100 years ago, right? Half measures avail us nothing.
Right.
Right. And so I think one of the things, and maybe it's just me, I don't think it is, but I was always a minimum standard person, right? I wanted to do just enough, whether it be in school or in church or whatever. Let me do just enough to be associated with this rather than committed to this. But when I got into recovery, this is the only thing I haven't been able to BS in my whole life.
Right.
I had to actually do this, and it made me a different person. It changed my perception of myself, of what I was capable of. It's just like, now writing all these books, it's like there was a time in my life that just never would have seemed possible because I'd start a book, I'd never finish because I think, nobody's ever going to read this, or I'm just deluding myself. And it was just really, I was fearful of failure. And what recovery has taught me is I don't have to be, because I'd rather fail than not know.
Well, I also think it helps us rewrite the story of our lives in that, I know that sounds kind of broad and meaningless, but it has allowed me to recreate in my mind, restructure in my mind what I think is appropriate, what I think is valid, what I think are laudable goals for myself, things that are meaningful to me and help me achieve what I think is meaning in my life. For example, the podcast.
Right.
Getting to talk to people like you is immensely rewarding to me. Offering up an avenue for people to have knowledge, not just about recovery and sobriety, but about goal achievement, doing things that make you happy and not just tore up,
right.
know?
And what I think is beautiful also, and I'm going to say this, and then we're going to take a quick commercial break, and special thanks to our sponsors, Audio Alchemy Productions. But you had those thoughts. You admitted that you had those thoughts. Nobody's going to read this. Nobody's going to, I had those thoughts. Nobody's going to listen to this podcast. Nobody's going to watch this podcast. Nobody's going to, read my book, but you pushed through that negative self-talk. You said, I don't know if, I can't speak for you, but oftentimes we just say F it, man, and just do it. Just go for it. You never know unless you try. And you did, and you're successful as a result of doing that. And you never stopped. You never let up. And now look at you go. All right, we're going to take a quick minute. Are you ready to launch your podcast with ease? Let Audio Alchemy Productions elevate your content with our state-of-the-art 4-camera studio and top-tier audio production. Focus on your message while we handle the rest. From recording to distribution on all major platforms. Whether you're a brand, an influencer, or a storyteller, let's amplify your voice. Contact us at 601-672-6591 and start your podcast journey today. All right, jumping back in. Thank you so much, Audio Alchemy Productions.
Back to your passions. Okay. Mississippi State, Duty Noble. How do you feel about State's NIL work?
Oh, I didn't know we were going to go there today. I think it's been okay. I mean, I give Charlie Winfield and those guys a lot of credit. I mean, I think there were a couple of, attempts early on that weren't successful, but I think he learned from all of that. And that we did the $1 million match here a few months ago and ended up raising over $3 million for what we already had. So, State's pretty much in line with their contemporaries, but I just don't think any of this is sustainable. The money runs out at some point.
It's got to. Like Georgia and Florida State really, I mean, I know that I'm torn between what I think is moral about using players' name, image, and likeness to make money for the schools. I'm torn between just outright manipulation in using of college players. And I mean, Florida State got beat by 60 points because those students, they're good players, opted out of the game to protect their money-making endeavors. And you can't blame them for that, but I just can't see how NIL and opting out is ultimately going to be good for college football.
Well, would they have opted out if they'd been in a playoff? No. That's why the whole thing's such a straw man argument. It's like people say, well, it's a meaningless game. Well, at the end of the day, they're all meaningless. I mean, honestly. So now are we going to get to a point now where it's like, well, we're going to play an FCS team this week. That's a meaningless game. That's not a conference game, whatever. So I'm not going to play that game too. I mean, I think there's a balance. You look at what Alabama's done. Alabama doesn't have opt-outs. I mean, it's just one of those things you look at. I mean, I think it's a cultural thing, but there's a lot of people that are, quote, opting out to prepare for the draft that are going to end up in the XFL or whatever we're calling it, the UFL, whatever we're calling it now these days. And there's a lot of people in these kids' ear. But, I think the days of guys playing for loyalty and for love of a university for many respects is over, and I think that's a really sad thing.
Well said.
Thank
I
you.
don't think there's any loyalty at all. None.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with both of you. I'm not a big sports guy, so this is way out of my wheelhouse. Way out of my wheelhouse.
I think talking about NIL stuff is more controversial than talking about drug addiction, to be honest with you. So.
Oh, look, I'm telling you. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's still dark money out there, which is so stupid to me. It's like there's some people that are so egotistical and so narcissistic. It's like they're still going to break the rules because you can make all the rules you want. I mean, they don't apply to the cheaters. What cheaters do, right?
Right.
But there is now a legal vehicle to work through a collective to legally donate money to help in your school's recruiting efforts, and people are still out there with dark money. And you're just putting your university at harm. I mean, honestly, because honestly, I think one thing is going to happen. I think if that continues to happen, if there's dark money out there, I think people are going to get absolutely hammered because the NCAA, as toothless as it may be today, there will be an overcorrection. Because, hey, we gave you guys a legal way to do it. You still cheated, you idiot. So there will be there'll be a recalibration of things, but we just got to kind of tread water right now. It's just it's very frustrating in many respects, but it is what it is, and it's not. You can't blame the kids, and I hate to call them all kids because most of them are old enough to go fight for our country, and they're certainly not kids across enemy lines, right? But the young people didn't fail us as adults. The leadership failed the young people by not having a better plan before all this kind of came out, but. It is.
I think they ought to condition NIL money on playing all the games for the whole season. I mean, Florida State got beat by 60 points. 60 points in a bowl game. I mean,
could have been worse.
Well, it could have.
Kirby could have got 100 if he wanted to. It's crazy how that works. And it's like, that's the thing too. For the fan out there, I understand the fan apathy in many respects. It's like, I mean, how do you go buy your kid a jersey, right? Because you don't even know if the players are going to be here next year, right? And I think what the best thing, I think that, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, people like that is maybe you sell Dak Prescott and Archie Manning jerseys or whatever, and then they'll in turn donate their proceeds back to the university, whatever, maybe because there's like all this NIL merchandising now. Hey, you can go buy Steve Robertson's jersey, but Steve Robertson may not be here next year, right? So you go buy it. Now it's obsolete, right? And so there's just so much to it. It's an evolving thing, and we've got to change with it. But I think the best thing that could happen, and I know this is controversial now to some people, but I think there needs to be a unionization and a collective bargaining agreement because like laws from state to state vary. And like in Utah, BYU and Utah can broker the deal. We can't do that in Mississippi. In most states, you can't. And so there's just too many state laws out there that are in contrast with each other. There needs to be a uniform policy, and there needs to be a situation where everybody profits in some respect. But, the star players obviously deserve to make more. Their name, image, and likeness is being used to market the program, right? I mean, and that's a thing that happened here recently. Is there's this lawsuit now about players that were in the pre-NIL era that were used like for ticket drives, like that have a video of Dak Prescott scoring a touchdown or, Bo Wallace throwing a touchdown pass to Dante Moncrief or something, well, those players' name, image, and likeness was used for profit, right? So you've already set the parameter. So now those players are going to be somewhat compensated, and that's another thing that is kind of coming forth. But the thing that I ask myself is, where does it end? Does it go all the way back to the 70s or 80s or whatever when, players appeared on the cover of football programs? You bought the football program because your favorite player was on it. He didn't get any money. Where does it end? Because I think at this point, it's a Pandora's box that is open, and there's an enterprising lawyer out there that's ready to represent every bit of these players.
There's always an enterprising lawyer out
Absolutely.
there thinking of something. Well, there's a modern trend in America to try to right past wrongs by figuring out that, we just got to monetize it somehow, and that somebody should pay for every bad thing that's ever happened. And it's just, that's why there are statutes of limitation. There's a limit here.
There should be.
And so, yeah.
Maybe we can bring a class action lawsuit against all the drug dealers that sold us drugs and alcohol, and all those stores that sold me beer when I was under 21, right? Did my parents get a crack at that? It's like we think that money is the solution for everything. And as David Lee Roth said many times, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it might be able to pay off unhappiness for a while,
Right.
But it's amazing. You're exactly right. It's like this is not about the good of the game. And in many respects, it's not about the good of the players. Now, I'm a firm believer, like when Jake Mangum and Dak Prescott played for Mississippi State, how many number 15 jerseys did they sell? And they didn't make a nickel in that. That's wrong. I think everybody can admit that's wrong. And when they first began to roll out this NIL stuff, that's what they said. It's like, well, this is what we're going to do.
Well, there's even a South Park about it. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
The Cartman rolls into the university.
Yes,
How do you not pay your slave? Your student athlete. They were used and they were manipulated and they were.
Yeah.
A lot of money was made off of their back, but
they also graduated without debt too, though.
Yeah, they also got a free degree.
Yeah, it's not like they were just complete volunteers or something. Yeah, I'm okay with some level of revenue sharing. What I'm not okay with is what we have now, which is the Wild Wild West, where a player can go to Southern Miss and have a couple of good years and then go in the portal, and then now all of a sudden, the coaches that helped develop him and recruit him when nobody else wanted him are left with nothing. And now all of a sudden this guy's cashing a $500,000 check to go, play for an SEC school. And you say, that's good for the player. Well, but it's not good for everybody. And it's also not good for the people that are having to pay the $500,000 to get him either. It's just, maybe I'm old school or whatever, but I think that we have lost a lot in the NIL era. And I give John Cohen credit. He told me before it ever happened, he goes, when they passed this transfer rule that allows for immediate eligibility coupled with NIL, it's going to be an absolute disaster. And I didn't believe him, and he was absolutely right, because they've now coupled all that together. There wasn't enough wrong with the previous system anyway when it came to transfers. My whole thing was like waivers. Like if Daniel Anderson plays at Mississippi State 1 minute a game for a basketball game, but he could transfer to Memphis or UAB and play more, well, why would I object to that, right? He didn't contribute here. He may be able to contribute elsewhere. So we'll just all agree and sign a waiver to grant him immediate eligibility. And so there was nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And so then we'll do it for everybody. And it's opened up this Pandora's box that I don't think that people understood all the ramifications of that decision when they got behind it.
Well, it'll correct, I guess, over time. But then people will have something to complain about. And then some enterprising lawyer will figure out a way to sue somebody.
If there's an enterprising lawyer out there willing to represent me for all of the aggravation and angst of all of this, having to cover all this stuff last few, I'm kidding. I love what we do. But what's so crazy for us is, like, I remember, you had National Signing Day in February, right? So this time of year, like, I couldn't be here ordinarily because you'd have 25 visitors on campus because you took all the official visits in January, right? And so that was where the calendar worked, and you're ramping up to that day. Well, this year, right? So Zach Arnett is fired the Monday after the Texas A&M.
Boom.
So that starts the coaching search. And so we're covering that all day, every day, in addition to covering the team. And then you've got we just kind of put recruiting on hold. I remember telling all my guys on staff, I said, we're going to do kind of the minimal stuff on this recruiting stuff because with a new staff coming in, you don't know who's going to be capped, who's going to be offered, who's going to be recruited. So we just kind of put a pin in that and covered the coaching search. And then you get to December signing period, and now we're in the middle of finishing up transfer portal recruiting. And like guys like Jeff Levy that are brand new coaches, he hadn't had a moment's peace unless it was on Christmas Day since the day he got here. And so I'm looking forward to the drop-add date. Classes start at Mississippi State. I think it's the 16th. And then the drop-add dates are at 22nd and 23rd. And even with that, there's a little wiggle room. But it's like once you get in the middle of January, you'll be able to kind of take a bit of a deep breath. But it has been an absolute meat grinder for everybody involved with all this, now for the better part of 3 months. And I think that fans need a moment, right? They need a chance to take a deep breath. It's good for us, right? It's good for our industry. I mean, the transfer portal era has been a cash cow for networks like ours. But the reality of it is that if you are a college fan today, you're being asked to do more than ever before. You've been asked to pay more, pay these seat licensing deals, your donations to the Bulldog Club or the Loyalty Foundation or whatever they have at Southern Miss. And then on top of that, now we're asking you to give the NIL. The financial commitment, I think now in many respects is outweighing the emotional commitment for a lot of people that just love their school and love being able to reunite with people on campus and have a good day at the ballpark. But it's become such a business. I think that some of our fans are kind of worn out.
Well, especially when it doesn't yield them what they want it to yield. I mean, if your team is causing you to pay up all this money, but they're going 10-2 or 11-1, you might can stomach a little bit. But when they're not, when you have to pay the Pied Piper, so to speak, and you have, you lost your coach and you're behind the 8 ball, it's tough.
Well, the thing that I would say too, it's just like Nick Saban brought this point up when NIL was first when we were in the first birth pangs of all this. He goes, you got this player that maybe you gave us $10,000 to go get, and then he comes in and doesn't play, and then he transfers. You're thinking, well, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be involved in all that. I mean, it's not like you can claim it on your taxes. And what's so funny, the beginning of all this, some people structured their NIL programs as if it was going to be tax deductible, like you're donating to some charity. I think to myself, what idiot thought that was going to work? And now all of a sudden you've got these people who have given all this money, and now they're having to pay taxes on top of it. It's not tax deductible. And so that all is so interesting to me because I think in the beginning people thought, okay, well, it'd be okay if Will Rogers gets an advertising deal with a local car dealership and just paid for to do an ad or whatever. I think he did a Subway ad and things. Well, that all makes sense, right? You should enable them to do that. They should be able to get some money from their jersey sales, right? That's how they rolled it out to us. They never told us we're going to have all these slush funds out here where everybody's donating all this, and then we're going to use that to recruit with. And that in and of its face is a violation, but nobody ever enforces it. It's kind of like, speeding on the interstate, right? I mean, you just kind of go with the flow of traffic, and you don't want to be the guy leading the pack out there, but you're not observing the posted speed limit signs just because it's not being enforced.
Well, they didn't ask me what I thought ahead of time.
No, but we all have opinions, though.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that I think about. It's just being a fan. I mean, it's never been more expensive to be a fan. And there's some people that are just like, you know what, I'm just going to sit at home and watch it on TV. And there's a lot of people in Mississippi State and Ole Miss have had real success in baseball. A lot of people are like, I'm going to really pay a little bit closer attention to this. Of course, Ole Miss a big year in football this year, and they're pushing now, right, to try to get over the hump next year, and they should, right? I mean, I think Mississippi State fans in the same situation would feel this esprit de corps, like, hey, we're so close. Let's all rally together and get this thing done. But I think some people begin to ask themselves, you look up one day and you say, well, what is all this really for? I used to just come for the love of the game and the joy of the game, watching the kids play and support my university. And, now I'm a stockholder in all this, but I don't get the return on the investment,
Well, I think that middle tier schools like State and Ole Miss are going to end up suffering more than the Texases and the USCs that just have such a large base of people to draw from. I mean, it's just, I don't think over the years, I don't think State and Ole Miss are going to be able to compete.
No, I think we're probably a year to 18 months away from having some meaningful change with all this. Of course, they went and lobbied, the federal government for whatever that's worth, to try to get some parameters, get some guardrails for this thing. And I think eventually you'll see some of that stuff happen. But it's like, once the genie's out of the bottle, how do you get them back in? You're not going to be able to come back and say, okay, no, you can't do this. And it just seems like every time the NCAA tries to implement some new program, there's a new lawsuit. And then some young enterprising or old enterprising lawyer cashes in on that. And the next thing you know, it's because they don't really care about the game. I mean, it's a case, right? And that's how they look at it. That's their job, right? These are my clients, and I feel that their rights have been infringed upon. So
I'm here to right those wrongs.
Yeah, so we need you to write us all a check. We'll all go away. But then you set a precedent, then all of a sudden it just goes from and it always starts in California. It's funny how if you notice like all that, with name, image, and likeness goes all the way back to the O'Bannon lawsuit over the EA Sports stuff, right? And now we hadn't had the college football game in forever. We're gonna get some information tomorrow, but it's like it feels like forever. You know how much fun that was? I mean, you'd sit up at night, you couldn't wait to go to GameStop and get that game and sit around and play that with your favorite team, and you could download rosters and things like that. Well, that's been taken from us too. Now we're gonna get it back, and then the kids are gonna get compensated. But it's like, it's just so incredible how so many things that we loved have been diminished because of litigation.
Well, in new and inventive ways of monetizing.
Sure.
Do you think you might ever write a book on all that?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to.
What about? I think you ought to write a book.
Just one?
No, on the dark money side of things.
Oh, well, that'll be the Salman Rushdie book, right? Like when,
wouldn't it?
Oh, I got some stories. What's so funny? I was at the Mississippi Book Festival. Been so incredibly grateful to have a chance to go to that. I mean, that is such a special thing. I mean, it really is. It's like I've been able to live a pretty cool life and meet a lot of cool people and do a lot of cool things. That's one of those things that means a lot to me. It really does. And a couple of years ago, this is, of course, shortly after Flim Flam and all the He Free stuff, and Salman Rushdie was like the featured author, right? And I'm on a sports panel, and somebody said, who was more likely to get shot, Salman Rushdie or Steve Robertson? And I think I won the poll. But yeah, when I get ready to retire and move to Costa Rica or something, I'll write the tell-all book and all the things that I've kind of tucked away. I got a few things. I got some things out there that can make some people nervous. Of course, by the time I write it, the statute of limitations will have run out. And but it's interesting. Like I broke Cam Newton's commitment to Auburn, and one of my favorite accomplishments as a sports writer is this is back before we expanded to 14 teams in the SEC, but I was one of the first 4 people in the recruiting industry to break a commitment to every SEC school in the same recruiting cycle. And you don't think about how hard that is, but I was doing a lot of junior college work and things like that. And so, but what happens is when you get these kids first, you're on them, they feel somewhat indebted to you. It's like, well, hey, this guy remembered me and kind of shined a light on me. And so working through all of that stuff, I've been able to accomplish a lot I'm really proud of. But the Cam Newton thing, I could write a big story about that. It's Cam Newton, when he was at Blinn College, right? Nobody was doing anything with Cam. I mean, Cam's name was mud, right? Because Cam had been kicked out at Florida, or he left Florida, kicked out, whatever you want to call it, over that stolen laptop thing. And anyway, so he was on the trash heap of college football, man, at Blinn College. And I had done some work with some players at Blinn, so I had their offensive coordinator's phone number, and I'm just going through thinking, we got to get a JUCO quarterback at Mississippi State. Oh, well, Cam Newton makes sense. Nobody had done anything with Cam. So I hit up the OC at Blinn. I goes, hey, I'd like to interview Cam. Do you have his number? And he goes, man, that Steve would be great. Cam has been great here. He has been a model student for us, been a good leader. He could use some good press. I said, listen, I don't want to talk about the laptop stuff. All I want to talk about is Blinn and who he's talking to right now. So sure enough, I get Cam on the phone, and he could not have been nicer. I mean, honestly, he was so incredibly grateful. And then like 20 minutes later, his dad calls me after the article's posted. Hey, can you change this? And you could change that. I was like, nah.
Not really work like that.
That's not how I do it. But he goes, hey, in the future, if you want to talk to him, I want you to call me first. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see. But I saw it was a chance, too, to get his dad's input. And I wanted him to be in there because ultimately I wanted to announce his commitment, whether it be to Mississippi State or not. And it's so funny. So I found out after he visited Mississippi State that he was going to visit Auburn. And Cam's roommate at Blinn was a guy named Chad Frokenicht. You probably never heard of Frokenicht in your life. Frochnecit, if I remember correct, Frokenicht. Well, State had offered him a preferred walk-on, and he really wanted a scholarship situation. Wasn't going to work out, but he and Cam had gotten to be really close. And so Chad had told me, because I was the only person doing anything with Chad, and he goes, hey, Cam's visiting Auburn this weekend. So I go over to our Auburn message board, said, hey, Cam Newton's visit. So all their media people are like, oh, no, this isn't true. I mean, we've already got our quarterback. And so this is like in the infancy of smartphones, right? So I call Frokenicht back. I'm like, Chad, I mean, Auburn's media says he's not coming in. He goes, oh, he absolutely is. And I said, well, how do you know for sure? So he sends me a picture of a plane ticket. And so then I'm like, okay, I got it now, right? And so all these Auburn people are like, no, there's nothing to this, until he showed up on campus. And so I got to break his commitment. But it's funny, though. Some people at Mississippi State were a little salty, of course, that Cam wasn't coming to Mississippi State. So they wanted it out there. And so somehow, some way, through a source, and most people say I don't have any, but I guess I'm just lucky. But anyway, I got Cam's mom's phone because Cam wasn't returning my calls, and Cecil wasn't returning my calls. So I get a hold of the mom, and I played a little poker with her. I say, well, congratulations. I understand Cam's made a decision going to Auburn. Oh, yeah, we're so excited. And so I knew I had it. And I said, well, I'd like to interview you on the record if it's okay. And she goes, well, I'd like for you to talk to my husband. And I said, well, could you have him call me? I've been trying to reach him all day. And so sure enough, he calls me, Pastor Cecil Newton, and he absolutely let me know in no uncertain terms how upset he was that I'd got a hold of his wife. And I said, well, if you'd pick up a phone call, maybe I wouldn't have to do that, Mm-hmm. And so he goes, well, yeah, go ahead and write your story. And they gave me a couple quotes. But it was one of those wild things because of who Cam came to be. And he has had so many critics, and I haven't had any interaction with him since he left Auburn. But I can tell you, Cam Newton, when I dealt with him, he was absolutely first class. And you can say what you want to about what he wore to press conferences and things like that. But, I mean, this is one of the greatest Southeastern Conference quarterbacks of all time. And nobody was even interviewed in this guy. He became a Heisman Trophy winner, wins a national championship. But people would have interest in those types of stories just because of the fact that it's a little bit off the beaten path a little bit. But I can just tell you unequivocally that Cam Newton was amazing to me. And when I first had the opportunity to do something good for him, he was incredibly grateful.
I love it. Well, Drew, we are almost out of time. You want to
unfair
drop your and Steve will definitely have you come back at sometime down the road. But you want to ask your questions there?
What do you do poorly in your recovery?
It's a good question. There's a lot of people out there willing to take my inventory. Maybe it's better if you ask them. But I don't go to meetings as often as I should, and I've never left a meeting feeling worse than when I went in.
Sure.
I don't go. COVID, it kind of became a COVID casualty for me. I kind of got out of the habit of going. I'd watch some Zoom meetings and things like that. I don't go to meetings as often as I probably should, but I still do my personal inventory every day before I go to bed. It's one of the things that I always try to do. And I get up each day and I try to read something positive, even if it's not daily reflections. I try to read something other than Twitter and message boards
Sure.
to get my day off on a good start. But that's probably the one thing I probably owe it to myself and to the community to be a little more plugged in at meetings. When I went and picked up my chip, there was a kid that picked up his 24-hour chip. And when I got up and picked up 32, I was watching him, and he mouthed the word "wow," and so I made sure when they always ask you, "Well, how'd you do it?" And I know people would say, "Well, Steve, you're not supposed to crosstalk in AA. Well, y'all can kick me out if you want to." But I looked at that kid and I said, "The chip that you picked up today is just as important, if not more important, than the one that I picked up."
Absolutely.
But it's so important too for us that have some serious time to go to those meetings, not just for ourselves, and it's not just for us to see them, it's for them to see us. Because if you went to a meeting and everybody had 6-9 months sobriety, what would you think? You'd think, does anybody ever make it?
There's a ceiling here.
Yeah, and so I think that's important. And I always go back to Hattiesburg. That's where I got sober. I always go back to Hattiesburg to pick up chips because it's not just that I want to see those same old faces again. it's just that's the place where I took my stand in life. And every time I make that turn, I can just feel myself gaining strength.
I feel the same way about Hattiesburg.
Yeah.
I found real freedom there. Love it. All right. What do you do well in your recovery?
Transparency, for one. And on my way here, I had a couple phone calls with some people that I don't say that I sponsor them, but I am a mentor in many respects. I don't have the time for full-time sponsorship, even though I get a lot from it. I'm a friend to those new to recovery, and I always make time for them. And they always act so apologetic, right? And hey, I know you're always busy, and I am always busy, but I'm never too busy to help somebody new in recovery.
Right.
And there's some people that, and some that I will sit them down and say, look, you are never bothering me. Okay. Don't feel that way. Forget the fact that you've seen my name in the paper or on ESPN or whatever. Forget all that stuff. I'm an addict just like you, right? You're my people. And these are my people, right? The people the still suffering addict and those who love them and those in recovery. That's the tribe that had the closest kinship to, right? Even more so than the Mississippi State stuff, right? It's like people look at me and say, that's the Mississippi State guy. No, before all of that, at the end of the day, these are my people. These are the people that I care about. And I've got a dear friend. When I first went to Starkville, I talked about AA was just kind of a challenge up there. And he goes, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make it better? And so I think that kind of led me to be a little more transparent about my recovery, especially in the age of social media. And I'll tell you a quick story about that, an ego check that I got about 3 years ago. Is, I'd written Flim Flam and Stark Villains had come out and the website was doing great and the Boneyard, still doing great. And I was at the Fast Break gas station on 182 in Starkville. And this lady walks up to me and she goes, hey, you're the randoms guy. Because I do the thing on Facebook occasionally called randoms. It's just, recovery thoughts. And I thought, I got best-selling books. I got this website and this is what this woman knows me for, something on Facebook, really had to get over myself pretty quick. And she says, well, a friend of mine turned me on to that. And my son's in rehab. And she goes, I print those out and I mail them to him. And it's like, then you start thinking that's what really matters. That's what matters most, right? Is carrying the message to the addict that still suffers. And I got to see this lady out here that finds some sense of hope because it's just something that I put on Facebook. Usually it's a gratitude list or it's when I'm down and depressed and I'm trying to pull myself up.
Psych yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but it's like, that's the thing. It made me realize that at the core of all of this, the recovery piece is the most important piece because that's what everything else is dependent on the cornerstone of that.
Right. Exactly.
You'd have never had that cool Cam Newton story.
No. And that's the thing about all this stuff too, is like, I had somebody one time tell me that I'm probably Mississippi's most famous drug addict. And I don't know how I feel about that. But if that's the mantle that some people want to put, I'm prepared to carry it because I'm so incredibly committed to this, to carry the message. And, I get emotional thinking about this. I'll try to make it through this without crying. It's difficult for me to even talk about recovery because I'm so damn grateful, right? Even all these years later, everything I have came from me getting clean and sober and staying clean and sober. But when I hear these stories, now these people contact me from all over the country. And there are people out there that are really struggling. And I don't mean like, they didn't get to go on a good vacation this year. There are people that are so spiritually and emotionally broken. And they see something like this show, and us sitting around talking about recovery, and they want it so bad, and they just don't know how to do it. And I think that's the real challenge for people like us that have been in recovery for a while is we can get out here and celebrate being on top of the mountain and, hey, look at all this. And at the end of the day, it is a daily struggle for so many people just to simply make it through the day and get back into bed without drinking or using. And that used to be me. It did. And I'll never forget that. And I had this lady, the first time I did a recovery podcast, she called me through Facebook Messenger and it was really weird. I'd never heard my phone just started ringing. I'm like, what is that? And she just starts telling me her life story and how I got to get sober because of my career, my family, my kids. And I said, wait a second. What if all that's gone tomorrow anyway? What are you going to do? Go get loaded? And she goes, well, I just don't know. And I says, if you're doing it for any other reason, it's never going to work because that's a condition. And I'll tell you this without any equivocation. Every limitation that I have placed on my recovery, like everything I've always said, well, if this ever happened, I'd probably go get loaded. Every bit of it's happened. But I hadn't gone and gotten loaded. Every single thing. It's like God is like, okay, well, hey, you want to put this hurdle up here? I'm going to help you get over it. And one of the things that I've learned about recovery, and I think this is maybe the most important thing that we say today, is God will do for you what you can't do for yourself, but not one thing more. You're not a robot. You got to do your part.
Right.
It's
got to
like,
bring the shovel.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing too. Is like, well, so if it's all about God, if I go get loaded, did God get me drunk? You have a decision to make. God will provide you the opportunity to have the freedom to make that decision, but we got to do our part. And it's all goes back to this whole thing about, I didn't get lucky. I had to work for this. Right. And I couldn't go reinvent the wheel or build a better mousetrap. I mean, it's like that. I remember there was a guy named Robert Pesner who was my first sponsor, God rest his soul. And I stayed sober the first 2 years despite him because he told me I couldn't make it. He knew what he was doing, right? He knew that I was one of these ultra-competitive people. I needed to be challenged. I didn't need to be coddled and say, oh, it's all going to be okay. I needed somebody to get in my face and say, you know what, I don't think you're tough enough to do this. Because he knew that that's how I was going to respond because I'm stubborn in the right way, right? And he told me something that still haunts me to this day is during family week, he told me, he said, we're teaching your mom how to mourn your loss. And yeah, it's tough. Even all these years later. And he goes, and he said, Steve, I think it's best that you just pack up your stuff and leave Pine Grove. And he goes, there are literally thousands of people dying to have that same bed you take for granted. Because I was just BSing my way through. Because that's how I got into life, right? I was always smarter than everybody else, right? And so I could just I could give that half-measured effort, right? I could just go out there and be a minimum standard guy and still be better than most people. And it was one of those things that resonated with me. And he told me, he said, Steve, you're too smart to accept the simple program. He said, because you can't just work the steps. You got to think you can find some easier, quicker way. Because I thought, like, if I memorized the 12 steps, they'd let me leave. Right. If I could come in here and just recite the 12 steps and just kind of BS my way through, they'd let me go.
Study for this test.
Exactly.
Look, man, please come back soon.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, we appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, go get his new book, When the Bottom Falls.
You can get it at Lemuria.
Yep, you can do that.
You can order at whenthebottomfalls.com.
There you go. Man, thank you so much for coming.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
I know we're running along here, but the number one thing today, whether you're a parent or a husband or a wife or a child of somebody that's suffering, never, ever, ever surrender the people you love to drugs and alcohol. Ever, ever, ever. And I wrote about this in the book. I was so incredibly wrong about the people that love me. I thought I was unlovable. I thought I'd burned every bridge. And I thought, you know what? They are content to let me die. That's what I had convinced myself of. And I get chills thinking about this. But it's kind of like that visualization. Like you want them to reach for help, right? It's like, the people that I loved weren't even at arm's length. It wasn't even like I had to reach. It was just like that first little twitch. Like once they saw my hand move in that direction, they all grabbed me. And so there is somebody that you love.
Don't give up.
That may feel that way. And that's why I think it's so important that you got to love people where they are. I'm not saying excuse their behavior. Acceptance is not approval, right?
No enabling.
Exactly. But once they make the move, you got to be there to help. You got to be there to pull because they are convinced that nobody loves them. And love is the greatest of things. And I don't know that I would have made it without. And sometimes people love you enough to tell you the truth. I got enough people blowing smoke up my skirt, right? But I love those people that just call me and say, Steve, I think you're being a little bit phony about this, right? I need that in my life. But when I was in that state, I just needed to know that somebody gave a damn, that somebody cared about me, that somebody loved me, because I had convinced myself that nobody did. And so if you have that person in your life, maybe today, and maybe you don't need to call them or go see them, maybe you just send them a message on Facebook and say, listen, I just want you to know that I love you, because you don't know what that may mean to that person who is convinced they're unlovable.
Well said. Well
All right,
said.
ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I hope that's what you guys wanted.